Welcome in. It's the PFF NFL podcast. Happy Wednesday morning, live on YouTube. How you doing, Sam?
Just fighting through the cold still, Steve.
I know the answer, not well.
I've got the tea here. Apparently coffee was not good for it, so I've had to go to tea, trying to improve the voice. Yeah. It's still a work in progress. The good news is yesterday I couldn't talk at all. Today I can talk, it just sounds like I have a cold. So we're making progress.
Well, that's good. It's good to see that you're working through it, and then I'll drink your share of coffee around the office this morning.
I have no doubt that you will.
All right, we've got it's our Wednesday morning podcast. It's only on YouTube, and as always, we'll check out the Dwight Stephenson. I almost said Donald.
Dude.
It gets in my head sometimes.
Right.
Dwight Stephenson Award watch list. It's the top award over at PFF. And, of course, the big news in the NFL yesterday, multiple trades. Marcus Peters going from the Rams to the Ravens. Jalen Ramsey going from the Jaguars to the Rams. The Rams are going all in. They don't want to have a first-round pick ever. And we'll break it all down. We'll discuss all of that stuff in a minute. But let's start with the Stephenson Award. We're doing it every single week. It's the best player in the NFL, our highest-rated player in the NFL, regardless of position, regardless of value. Let's start on the defensive side of the ball today, as we start to see a lot of, similar names, and then, the sneaky good names that are sticking around.
Sneaky
names that are sticking around the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Aaron Donald has kind of come back to the top. The cream has risen. He is back where he normally is, which is right at the top of these things. He isn't number one, though, in terms of overall defensive grade, but he's right up there. He's number two. Obviously, Donald getting to play relatively weak opposition will help.
Yeah.
He went up against the 49ers, who didn't have their two starting tackles, and they actually lined him up a lot on the edge. You've talked about this before, how they're doing more of that this season. It's interesting because overall, so they are doing more of it, and I've kind of asked the question, why would you do that? You have by far the best defensive pass rusher in the NFL. Why would you screw around with that and move him to the edge? And there's been logical reasons, thrown back at me. Well, it gets him away from the double teams inside. Sure, but last year he was getting double teamed an absolute ton of the time. I don't remember the exact figure, but even with the double teams, he was generating pressure at a rate, commensurate with the best pass rushers in the NFL. So it doesn't feel like a great reason to do that. And then, to take advantage of matchup problems. These guys have got no tackles. Let's play him on the edge where he goes right around the tackle. Sure. Overall, this season, he's been generating less pressure on the edge than he has inside. But in this game, he didn't. In this game, he actually took advantage of that and won. So it kind of made sense.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic because I think in a perfect world, you'd actually want him facing double teams and still beating them as he was last year. And then freeing up guys like Dante Fowler off the edge and other guys. And, of course, there's always stunts and there's other components to it. But if Aaron Donald did like J.J. Watt did, which was move pretty much from the interior to the edge. That's what Watt did early in his career. I don't know that Donald is like an elite edge rusher, if that was his pure job, right? I know that he's the best interior pass rusher of the last 20 years or so, right? So, it's an interesting dynamic with the Rams. I don't know if it's ever going to really show up in his pressure numbers this year if they keep doing it, but as far as just defeating blocks, he's doing it there still.
Here's something we need to talk about probably the next podcast, right? The J.J. Watt goes from the interior to an edge rusher. Donald has been experimenting going the other way. Do they need to move J.J. Watt back inside?
Yeah,
post-injury J.J. Watt. Does he need to move back inside
get a little bit closer
to become the dominant player, the really dominant player he used to be?
Well, don't forget, too, this offseason we've done a lot of in-depth breakdowns with our analytics team, and they keep saying, look, even though people think interior pressure is more valuable, edge pressure is just a smidge more valuable than interior pressure, and it comes at a higher rate. So that also could be part of of that reason.
Generally, it comes at a higher rate, but does a guy like Donald generate pressure more on the edge?
Oh no, I don't.
Inside?
I don't know that he
so
would.
Far, the answer has been no.
Right. You mentioned he's not the highest rated player so far. We've got a guy just above him right now, Quinton Dunbar, the cornerback from the Washington Redskins, who's had two unbelievable games and two pretty good games. So two coverage grades over 90 so far this year.
Yeah. He had the benefit of Daniel Jones insistent on throwing him the ball.
Yeah, he did a nice job.
A lot of times.
Tight coverage.
Like, all right, I did it once, it didn't work.
Yeah.
I'm going to go right back at it. You know the way if you throw the ball at your receiver, he drops it, and it's like, wow, we're going to have to go right back at him, otherwise his confidence is gone.
That's what I did yesterday. I got to show you the video with Harry.
Yeah.
I had Harry running some routes. I put one right on him, and the 4-year-old, he dropped it.
Yeah.
But I kept feeding him.
You got to go right back to him. Otherwise, the confidence is going to go.
Yeah.
So with Dunbar, drops an interception. It's like, well, I can't have that. The guy's confidence is going to be gone. So Daniel Jones right back to him. Interceptions.
Passer rating of 35 when throwing into Quinton Dunbar's coverage so far this year.
Huh.
Not as bad as just spiking. Oh, is it?
No, it is.
39. Oh, yeah. Worse than just spiking the ball every single time. So don't throw at Quinton Dunbar. That's a tough one to maintain, but he's playing really well.
Particularly the way he's doing it, right? Because it is largely built off interceptions right now. He's only got one other pass breakup this season. If it was a guy who had, the high grade, the good numbers, and a bunch of pass breakups, he's been thereabouts every single time. He's not making it easy to catch the ball. Then you would have more confidence in that maintaining. But this is largely driven by the turnovers so far across a small sample size.
DJ Reader's still lurking around there for the Houston Texans. Didn't have any pressures last week, but did have a few wins as a pass rusher, 90-plus grade as a run defender. And then Calais Campbell, last year's top-graded edge defender as against the run. This year now has 31 pressures. That's tied for 8th in the NFL. So, a good all-around game from Calais Campbell. I think he's in that Cameron Jordan conversation, just like that quietly consistent, really good, most underrated type of player in the NFL.
And he's another guy that has straddle positions, not just over his career, but even this year. We talked the Watt stuff. Calais Campbell's another guy that's bounced around. He was he was a 3-4 end in Arizona, one that basically played 3-tech every single play. So essentially exactly the same position as a defensive tackle, and was really good there. Was, arguably the second best pass rushing interior force after Aaron Donald. Moves to Jacksonville. They play him more on the edge, albeit, a kind of closed edge more than the true sort of wide 9 pass rushing style. And then this year they've kind of moved him back again. They've had him inside a lot more than he was a season ago.
Jamie Collins is a guy we've mentioned in the last few weeks. We always say at the end of the year, if you look at just linebacker stats, it's nice when you have that linebacker that has like a bunch of sacks and a bunch of interceptions and some pass breakups. Collins has a season's worth of all of that right now.
Already, yeah.
Yeah, he already has 5 sacks, 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles. If he doesn't make an impact play for the rest of the year, it's like, hey, that's a pretty good linebacker season. So his grade is high. It's in the 90s, and it's very much driven by a lot of these big plays. Granted, those interceptions won't get high grades. Some of them are just tipped right to him. But just as the stat sheet goes, Jamie Collins looks ridiculous right now.
Particularly because, he's also missed a ton of tackles. He's got 6 missed tackles that are not helping that grade. So for him to be as high as he is shows you all those impact plays that he's made.
Khalil Mack still lurking around. He has 28 pressures. Eric Kendrick's in the mix. Anybody else? Any other names you want to throw in there?
No, I think that covers defense. Let's skip over to offense.
Let's do it.
Because it's still George Kittle, the best player in the world.
Highest graded offensive player, George Kittle.
Highest graded player, period. He's got the highest overall grade. But yes, highest graded offense player as well.
Yeah, that too. So George Kittle, essentially taking the reins as the top tight end. He's doing it in all phases for 7 missed tackles, 84% of passes being completed his way. He only has 1 touchdown, though, because some were negated by penalty.
And he's also, he's legitimately their number 1 target. They don't have this number 1 wide receiver. They lost Kyle Juszczyk, who was obviously the MVP of the offense, according to certain broadcasters. And now they have George Kittle picking up the slack.
How about Chris Godwin? Tampa Bay wide receiver, 91.4 overall grade. And we talked about Kittle catching 84% of his targets. Chris Godwin, as an outside receiver in a vertical scheme with Jameis Winston at quarterback, has caught 81% of his targets, meaning he is insane. Getting open. He's had a few screens in there too, but catching 43 out of 53 targets and averaging 15-plus yards per reception, forcing 7 missed tackles, 148.6 passer rating into his when he's targeted. Playing really well right now.
He really is. There might not be a more underrated player in the NFL right now than Chris Godwin. He has emerged as one of the best receivers in football. Right now, he's dramatically outplaying Mike Evans, who, on the same team himself is kind of underrated. And I don't know that people have caught up to that yet. Obviously, there's a lot of people out there that love Chris Godwin and think he's a great football player, but I don't know that anyone really appreciates just how well he's playing right now.
At quarterback, Russell Wilson maintains the top spot with a 90.7 grade, just edging out Carson Wentz. at 90.6. Tale of two seasons between those two guys. Russell Wilson has the stats to back it up. Passer rating of 124.7. Wentz is only at 94, but we've talked quite a bit about Wentz having some really poor luck. But it's tough to ignore what Wilson's doing. Those stats are real. He's got 14 touchdowns and no interceptions. We have him with 17 big-time throws to lead the NFL and only 2 turnover-worthy plays, which were fumbles. And so his stats are legit. He's at the top end of big-time throws and avoiding turnovers.
Yeah, we talked on Monday about how when he's on, he is as good as any quarterback in the NFL. The thing that separates him from the guys that have genuinely, Patrick Mahomes last year, for example, is he typically his team, for whatever reason, does not think he's capable of doing that in adverse situations all the time.
Yeah.
And 2, he has those games where it's not good. He has those bad games where he shows up and doesn't look like the same player. And those are the problem, right? It's not the high-end Russell Wilson stuff. It's that when it goes wrong, it goes pretty horribly wrong, and that usually happens a couple of times a season. It hasn't yet. So is this the year where they don't come along? Is this the Jameis year that you keep talking about where all the bad goes away and you only get the high end? Only for Russell Wilson, all you need to do is weed out 2 games instead of like half of his play.
It could be it. We'll talk offensive line a little bit.
Yeah. Who you got?
Quentin Nelson. 90.9 overall grade for Quentin Nelson. And we've got 3 offensive linemen over 90 right now.
I like players like Quentin Nelson because they bring everybody together.
Yeah.
We have a lot of friction with offensive line Twitter. The guys that just go out there and grade, punch and step and
finish
weird, biomechanical movements. They're like, wow, look at this. You never see a guy do this. You're like, well, who cares? He's getting beat while he's doing it. So those guys love that kind of stuff, and they love finish, as you say, guy teabagging somebody on the floor. They're big into that.
Yeah, that's going to win games,
right? Whereas we're like, look, did he win or not? Did he lose or not? What's the ratio of those things? How all that kind of stuff. But a guy like Quentin Nelson is so good at everything. He brings everybody together.
Yeah, we're all happy.
So as a draft prospect, everybody thought he was the best guard probably they'd ever seen, right?
Oh, it was a race to say who liked Quentin Nelson
first. Yeah.
And so much so, and I was like, look, I saw him as a redshirt freshman pulling against Virginia, and I was like, that's it. This guy's a great prospect. And then his dad chimed in, and his dad said, I loved him first. I think you quote tweeted one of us, and it's like, all right, you win.
Yeah,
Quentin Nelson's dad. So
you saw him first.
So the best guard prospect to come out in years, and I think everybody agrees on that. And then PFF grades agree on it too. 90.9 grade, 90.6 as a run blocker. He's still giving up 7 pressures in there. So he could actually improve a little bit as a pass blocker, but just shows how dominant he's been in the run game.
I mean, he's showing the potential to be one of the best guards ever. He's got that kind of skill. I think everyone knew that, but now that the grade is starting to get there, because again, it's when the thing you love is the teabagging and the the highlight reel headbutt to the face, that kind of stuff. Like you can do that without actually playing that well.
Yeah,
so, right. As a rookie, it's already, look at Quentin Nelson, he's already the best guard in the NFL. You're like, well, no, let's hang on. Dial that back a little bit, right? But by the end of the year, he's playing really well. And now he is the best guard in the NFL right now, at which point the next step is how high can he push that?
I think I might just go watch all of his positively graded run blocks after the podcast.
Okay.
It's just enjoyable.
Fair enough.
Brandon Brooks of the Philadelphia Eagles, he's up over 90 at guard as well. And then Lyle Collins, he's been banged up for the Dallas Cowboys, but he's up over 90. He's the starting right tackle over there for the Cowboys, giving up 6 pressures, but another guy that's been dominant in the run game.
Yeah, and a huge part of why Dallas has gone from being very, very good to not so good, because they've lost both their starting tackles.
Their offensive linemen. Anybody else? Any other names to throw into the mix here?
For the offensive lineman, no.
Or just in the offense in general?
I think we need to mention Carson Wentz, because he's the guy that the stats don't necessarily match up with, right? You've got Russell Wilson, where the advanced numbers match up perfectly with the box score numbers, which match up perfectly with the grade. With Carson Wentz, it's a little less clear.
Yeah, Wentz, I've written about it quite a bit over at PFF.com, but he's got like 6 big-time throws that have fallen incomplete. It's 5 or 6 now. I can't remember the number. But either way, last year the league leader had 7.
Yeah.
It was Aaron Rodgers.
He has 17 dropped passes. Russell Wilson has 5.
Yeah, and there's – so that's one of those things, too, that I think we touched on a little bit with Mitch Trubisky when his stats were a little bit more inflated. Even all the advanced numbers, QBR and all the EPA-driven stuff, really don't factor in drops the same way that we do. And just having your receivers never drop a pass elevates you so much. And so I think the quick analysis on that is like if you gave Russell Wilson a league average drop rate, his stats come down a chunk. If you did the same thing with Wentz, his stats go up. It doesn't change anything that they've done throw for throw.
And that's assuming essentially that, all drops are created equal, which obviously they're not, right? Multiple of those drops would have been not just touchdowns, but game-winning touchdowns.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like he's put the ball in the end zone at the end of a game-winning drive for a guy to drop it. Like there's only so much you can blame the quarterback for wins and losses when you're literally doing your job to deliver the ball to the end zone for what should be the winning points, and the guy on the other end of it drops the ball.
And just one other underrated part of quarterback play that nobody's going to mention. If you guys have premium stats 2.0 as part of your elite package, what I like to do is go to the quarterback page and just sort by the fumble grade and just understand how much we put into we give harsh downgrades when guys fumble, and it's their fault. We've talked about this quite a bit. It never shows up in stats. Again, it doesn't show up in advanced stats either unless the defense does something with it, because a lot of the advanced stats are EPA-driven and all this stuff. So Wentz has a 90.5 fumble grade. So just not having turnover-worthy plays that are fumbles is another point that it's just not going to bring your grade down. So Carson Wentz being up there, Dak Prescott's up there, Russell Wilson's up there, but he does have a couple fumbles in there. Kyler Murray's actually number one. Of all the things Kyler Murray's doing, he's actually taking care of the ball pretty well. So that's just like a hidden, underrated part of Carson Wentz's good grade per PFF.
I like it.
Sound good?
Yeah.
There you go. It's the Stephenson Award. It's the top players in the NFL.
Now let's get to some trade talk.
Can you hear me still?
Madness.
Something popped.
I can still hear you, yeah.
Okay. Something feels off. There we go.
Wow.
Look at this.
Technical difficulties.
Listen, the best part about being a professional is when you just ad-lib
Scratch
a little
the surface?
bit.
Oh,
just ad-lib a little bit. And we're scratching the surface. Yeah. So what are we talking, all the trades?
Yeah, madness. Trade madness happened.
All right, so let's recap everything that happened yesterday. The Los Angeles Rams started by trading Marcus Peters to the Baltimore Ravens.
Yes.
Right?
Which, for a minute, looked hilarious because they already lost Aqib Talib to injury, right?
Right.
So you ship Marcus Peters off. Suddenly you've gone from having Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib as your starting corners to having Troy Hill and David Long. And David Long literally hasn't played a snap for them yet this season.
As much as we like David Long.
Right. And as much as I love Troy Hill.
Right.
That seemed like a downgrade. Let's just put it that way. And it actually seemed like, we're not in love with this cornerback position. So I said to you after it happened, like, I wonder if they're maneuvering for Jalen Ramsey. Because otherwise, this is kind of ballsy, right? The team that thinks they're heading, to the playoffs, want to go for a Super Bowl again, to just go, you know what, we don't need cornerbacks.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're factoring in Nickel Roby-Coleman as their slot, but he doesn't play outside effectively. You would need, you're talking about two starters. You're talking about two guys that need to man the outside most of the time.
Peters is just such an interesting player because he came over from Kansas City, where we always talked about he gives up a lot of yards, but he's a playmaker. I mean, just all the interceptions that he's had through the years, some of them are incredible. Some of them he has no business even being there. He's just this instinctual player where he'll be playing man coverage and he'll just peel off his man and go pick one off, or he's just got good zone instincts. He knows how to bait quarterbacks. He knows how to get baited by quarterbacks. It's just this really boomer bust type of style of play. Last year, Peters did not play particularly well. Plus, you have all these open field tackles that he was missing. Like, things just didn't go great. This year was a little bit more of the same. He's got 2 picks, a pick 6, pass breakup, but he's also given up over 16.5 yards per reception. I mean, nothing sums up Marcus Peters by saying, look, he's going to give up a ton of yards, but he's going to make some plays. He's given up 2 touchdowns. I think the problem with the Rams, though, is Aqib Talib, who had been, since about 2012 or 13, extremely consistent. I mean, he was in that top 10 cornerback range year over year, could play man, could play zone, really good at everything, and he had really been struggling. And he's given up 160 yards as well, 112 passer rating into his coverage. So all of a sudden, the Rams' cornerback situation went from a strength, what we thought on paper was, Talib and Peters, right? You could deal with Peters giving up a little bit if he's going to make some of those big plays.
Yeah.
But not if Talib's giving it up too. So the Rams just went, all right, Talib's hurt, we're going full overhaul here.
So let's concentrate on the Baltimore side of it first, right? So Marcus Peters goes to Baltimore. They've had some issues in the secondary. They've been dealing with injuries. They've been, dealing with guys missing. And, guys like Maurice Kennedy has taken a ton of snaps for them this season. And that's obviously not an ideal situation.
Gene 3-step.
Right. So they bring in Marcus Peters. They still have Marlon Humphrey, who's, a tremendously talented player. He's the guy that punched the ball out from Juju Smith's hands to basically win that game for the Ravens over the Steelers. So how does he fit in to this secondary, and what does it do for them?
So I think the Ravens – so just to back up to the Rams real quick, they've played a lot more zone this year.
Right.
I think there was a point where they didn't fully trust those guys in man coverage. That's what Wade Phillips likes to run. So now in Baltimore, there's no distinctive, hey, they play man, they play zone. They do a little bit of everything. But I think at their best, they're the team that likes to create phantom pressure up front. Send 4, but creative 4. Send 5 every now and again. Leave the guys in man coverage in the back, and just create difficult passing lanes for quarterbacks and all that stuff. That's kind of where Peters did his best work with the Kansas City Chiefs. It's when he could play man, but he knew that there was some stuff going on up front that might get the ball out of the quarterback's hand a little bit quicker. So then he could ad-lib a little bit. I mean, I think Baltimore, you talk about playmakers in the back end between Marcus Peters and Earl Thomas, just from a you can turn the ball over standpoint,
right.
That's incredible.
So they're another one of these teams that, by and large, runs that cover 1, cover 3 look.
Right.
Single high safety, obviously that makes sense. They bring in Earl Thomas, the guy that makes the single high safety scheme work. So obviously they'd be running a ton of that. But between cover 1 and cover 3, they're running that over 60-odd% of the time. So that's what they're playing most of the time. And I think the key to a guy like Peters is mixing up what you're asking him to do, because I don't think you want him playing man coverage every single down.
Right.
Neither do I think just having him sit in the zone takes advantage of what he does best as well, because he is a physical corner sometimes and can, really cause problems. So I think you do need to have the confusion as to what he's going to be doing, because that's where that ad-libbing makes a ton of sense, right? When you look up as a quarterback and everybody, you think you read one thing and Peters is going to do something else, that's where the issues come, because you put the ball to an area that he's not supposed to be there, suddenly Peters shows up because
right.
he changed something.
So I like it. I mean, the Ravens continue to be the team that's like, look, we're going to build from the back to the front. We're going to continue to just load up on, in the secondary with good players that we think can make an impact, and just try to manufacture a pass rush up front. So it's furthering the coverage over pass rush experiment.
What about the Rams side of things with Jalen Ramsey coming over?
All right, so they lose Marcus Peters, Talib to the injured list, and Jalen Ramsey coming in. Let's be honest about Jalen Ramsey here. I think talent-wise, he's as good as it gets in the NFL.
Yes.
The actual talent and his ability to do anything. I mean, he could play in the slot, he could play free safety, he could play outside, he could do it all. He's got one elite year of production, which was back in 2017 when the Jags defense was legit. But he's gotten beaten a little bit through the years. But I like the way Eric Eager summed it up, right? You've got a guy that's potentially at the most valuable position in the NFL, could actually be the most valuable defensive player in the NFL. But it's highly volatile, and so there's a little risk in there, but it should make them better.
Yeah, he's also a great example of a guy whose numbers will always look worse because of the role he's been tasked with. So Patrick Peterson had this for years, right? It's like he may have the hardest job for among any cornerback, and that's the issue.
They're calling right now.
Uh-oh. Hard out has run in.
Sam's got a hard out. I'll finish it.
Are you gonna bail on that?
Can you jump into the
nook?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to give it a go.
I'm gonna finish the podcast by myself. I've dreamed of this day, Sam. Finally, Sam's gone, and it's monologue time. This is what we do here on live YouTube. I get to give you all of the Jalen Ramsey analysis. Tyler, what do I address the camera now, or can I still just stare at my computer? This is just so confusing. What do I do? I do wish you had a cutout of Sam. We need to have that. That's next on the to-do list when we have to go. So just to wrap up our Jalen Ramsey thoughts here, a guy that in 2017 did have an incredible season. He's been a little bit up and down since then. Sam's point that he was about to make is like, hey, he's going to play some man coverage. He's going to play it against good corners. There's a lot, or against good receivers. There's a lot of times opposing offenses aren't really going to target Jalen Ramsey. But I think the value of a number one corner has that trickle-down effect, especially if you use him creatively, if you use him in a more of a matchup role. And I think Wade Phillips at defensive coordinator knows how to use his talents. He's shown that through the years. There's some analysis out there that I disagree with. I see a lot of people saying this isn't going to help the Rams beat the 49ers in their division or the Seattle Seahawks. And I think too many people are getting short-sighted with you make moves to win the division, obviously, but you don't make every move just to match up with teams in your division. So the 49ers, just because they don't have a true number one receiver, or even the Seattle Seahawks, they don't necessarily have a true number one receiver, although DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, both two guys that you have to account for on that offense. Just because you don't have a DeAndre Hopkins, say, in the division doesn't mean you don't need Jalen Ramsey. You have to win more than the 6 games in your division. So Ramsey in a vacuum still does help the Rams, no matter who is in the division. Even if the Niners' top target is George Kittle, and that the Rams, the Seahawks' top targets aren't maybe household names. So I do think it still helps the Rams. I think the long-term implications here with the Rams, they give up a 2020 and 2021 first-round picks, meaning they just went 3 straight years without a first-round pick. They're going to be 5 straight years without a first-rounder since they got Jared Goff. And usually that's a difficult scenario to maneuver. They've done a good job to this point. They made the Super Bowl last year. They had great seasons in 2017 and 18. It's really tough to maneuver when you don't have impact players coming in. And I know Ramsey's an impact player, but eventually they're going to have to pay him. So it's just it's a win-now type of strategy in the NFL. There's always some inherent risk to it, but I do think Ramsey, in a vacuum, makes that defense better for now and in the long term. They also, the Rams, traded for Austin Corbett, an underachieving second-round pick. We liked him as more of a third-round player, I believe, in our draft board a couple of years ago. Cleveland Browns drafted him high in the second round. He was a guy who played tackle at Nevada, playing, pretty much all across the line so far with the Browns and just never caught on. The Rams' offensive line, let me just look where their pass blocking grade is right now, but it's among the worst, if not the worst so far. The Rams needed to make a move up front. Second worst pass blocking grade so far this year for a team that was much better last year on the offensive line. They've had a lot of question marks, injuries up front, so the Rams needed some kind of help on the O-line. I don't mind taking a flyer on an Austin Corbett. So very eventful day for the Los Angeles Rams. Marcus Peters out, Jalen Ramsey in, and Kenny Young also in, linebacker from the Ravens, and Austin Corbett in. So Rams making a ton of moves. They still feel like they've got a shot this season. Ultimately, though, they need the O-line to play better, and they need the defense to play better. And the Austin Corbett move and the Jalen Ramsey move are both moves in that direction. I've got no thought. I can't work off of anybody here. I was going to ask, what else do you think about this Jalen Ramsey move, Sam? Well, Sam loves Jalen Ramsey. He thinks he's a fantastic player, just needs to live up to his potential. All right, thanks, Sam. I appreciate that. That's good insight. That's what I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, so I'm interested to see what Wade Phillips does with the Rams. Do they start to play a little bit more man coverage? Sam talked about Troy Hill, David Long being out there. David Long, very good man coverage corner. If he could see the field, the corner out of Michigan, very good man coverage type of corner. Troy Hill, more of a zone instincts type of player. So we'll see how Wade Phillips plays to all their strengths. But I'll tell you this, the Rams have an Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey on the field at the same time. It's pretty incredible, just as far as the star power goes with the Los Angeles Rams. So we'll have much more on all of the trade on the PFF NFL podcast on Thursday. We'll be previewing Week 7 action. Thanks to everybody for tuning in live here on YouTube. It's our special extra edition PFF NFL podcast. For Sam Monson, who's live on the radio right now, Wharton Moneyball, if you guys want to go check it out on SiriusXM. For Sam Monson, I'm Steve Palazzolo. We'll talk to you Thursday, PFF NFL podcast, Week 7 preview.